Hey, Hound Dogs, I'm David Hankins,
And I'm Paul Hankins.
and you're on the air with Power Squared. Paul is on his sick bed, got off of it to come and do this podcast, so the show must go on.
Yeah.
Uh, appreciate
I, uh,
appreciate you doing that.
uh, just to make it clear for those watching, it's because I've been fighting a cold. I ruled out the other thing.
You got the little C, I should say.
Yeah.
Anyway, so good. We're here to talk this week about Resident Evil games Part Two.
Yes.
Last October, I guess it was.
Yeah.
We did a look at Resident Evil up through
The original Resident Evil 4.
right, and now we're gonna pick it up from the
So as the title suggests, it's from Resident Evil 4 Remake all the way up to Resident Evil Village.
all right. So do you want to start us off and tell us? You want to, I guess, summarize the game for people that may not be familiar with it.
Okay. Well, Resident Evil is a series of games, typically about fighting an outbreak of some kind.
Okay.
And there's a different viral or, starting from Resident Evil 4, parasitic threat that affects people and turns them into zombies or a zombie equivalent.
Does this all take place in the same town?
No.
Okay.
The first game takes place in the Spencer Mansion,
Okay.
the Arklay Mountains, I believe, and which is outside Raccoon City. Raccoon City becomes the setting for 2 and 3. Then you have Code Veronica takes place on an island somewhere. Resident Evil 0 was a prequel that took place. I want to say the same era that took place in the Arklay Mountains.
Okay.
And Resident Evil 4 takes place in basically Spain.
Okay. Oh, I was just all right. And who puts this game out?
Capcom.
Okay. And is it? I know we play it on, or you play it on a PlayStation 4,
Yeah.
5, 3, 2, whatever. But
Yeah.
is it available on other platforms as well?
Yes.
Okay.
It depends on the game. And some games are more readily available than others.
Okay.
I should mention Resident Evil is. I'll recap if I didn't say this or I'll just say it in case I didn't say it already. Shinji Mikami created Resident Evil. He directed. I remember he directed Resident Evil 1 and 4, or the original 4.
Uh-huh.
And Resident Evil has been influential with zombie fiction in general.
Okay. All right. So I guess we're ready to start with the remake of Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, so Resident Evil 4 remake. I played the PS5 version. It has the same story as Resident Evil, the original Resident Evil 4, but I know this game was. Some people don't like it as much as the original, and some people like it better than the original. Personally, I think in many ways it improves on the original. It has more modernized gameplay. So, like, now you can move and shoot at the same time.
Wow. Revolutionary.
Yeah. The character writing is a lot stronger. So, like, Ashley and Luis are more noticeable there because they have more personality, and I think Luis is woven better into the plot. Certain things happen for a more natural reason as opposed to like in the original, for example, in the original Resident Evil 4, Ashley is trapped by this like contraption that has a 1 in a million chance of actually working, and requires her to be in a specific spot at a specific moment. When Resident Evil 4 Remake, that scene happens in a much different way. She is briefly taken over because of the Las Plagas in her system, and she is separated from Leon through a like gate, I believe. So that feels more natural. Leon and Krauser's relationship is also a little different, but I think the way Krauser is woven into the story is a little better in Remake, because you also actually get to see like the plot to kidnap Ashley instead of having to look at a spin-off game to get that information.
So I assume that it wasn't right after 4 they did the remake.
No.
Why have they remade all the games or just 4?
So Resident Evil 1 had actually already been remade for the GameCube. So when I played the HD version of that, when I played the HD version of Resident Evil 1, it was based on that remake.
Okay.
And they have also remade Resident Evil 2 and 3, so the natural next step was 4.
Okay.
I'll also mention with Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's clearer that they are going for a more, I guess, standardized timeline. Trying to think of the right word. Consistent timeline.
Okay.
Because with Leon, his personality is a little different in the remake because he's still suffering some amount of PTSD from Resident Evil 2.
Okay. So is it the same characters in each game?
No.
Okay. But Leon, some of them do? Are they like in an arc of games?
Yeah, so Resident Evil characters from Resident Evil 1 reappear in some later games, like Chris Redfield reappears in Resident Evil 5, Jill reappears in Resident Evil 3, Leon appears in like 2, 4, and multiple characters come back in 6.
Okay.
It kind of depends on the game, but there are some long running arcs. Interestingly, I would say the Resident Evil 4 and 1, those are two starting points someone could have with the series, because Resident Evil 1 is the beginning, and Resident Evil 4 is mostly disconnected from the rest of the previous storyline.
Okay.
This does reintroduce Albert Wesker into the remake timeline, and hints at a Resident Evil 5 remake. But anyway,
I think there hasn't been one.
Not yet.
Okay.
So the updated gameplay with 4 Remake also includes like some larger areas and additional side quests, whereas the original Resident Evil 4 only had one side quest. It also has an updated shooting gallery, which I found actually easier to clear certain challenges with.
Are they remaking these games because the software got better, or because they're fixing holes in the story, or they're improving the story, or all three? Or
I think it's more to make it more accessible, but also Resident Evil 7 showed that you had success with a more grounded version of Resident Evil, so they're applying that tone to the
other ones.
the
Okay,
remakes.
so this came out after 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was like last year.
Okay. All right.
So anyway,
Recommend?
vary. Whether or not you've already played the original Resident Evil 4, I highly recommend the remake. I'll also mention the separate ways content with Ada Wong is also available, but as paid DLC. I also thought that was really good, but get it on sale because it honestly should have just been in here like it was in the original. But Separate Ways does fill in holes left in this, so it's like it was created to complete it.
Okay.
And if you end up not liking this as much as the original, then the original is still available on the same systems as the remake.
Okay. So 4 been redone. So I guess now we move on to 5.
Yes. So Resident Evil 5 takes place in Africa.
Okay.
And follows Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar. I think I said her name right. So they end up discovering the progenitor virus.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into the specific controversy around the game because it's beyond the scope of this. But also, it's been a long time. But anyway, I ended up liking Resident Evil 5 more than I thought I would. I don't like that it still has the tank control style from the original Resident Evil 4 because you can't move and shoot at the same time, which to me is only notable because at the time that Resident Evil 5 came out, other shooters had you move and shoot at the same time, so it felt archaic in that sense. This was also designed with co-op in mind, so Chris and Sheva are always active. And you can trade items between their inventories in real time, but you can only have like 9 items at all. There's also DLC that helps fill in story gaps, and I thought those were actually good additions, especially Lost in Nightmares, which also has an Easter egg that lets you play with the original fixed camera from the original Resident Evil.
Oh, that's cool.
And this has Wesker as the main villain, and it is kind of silly because the classic Resident Evil series was, I guess, more B movie with its tone. And I thought Wesker's plan actually made total sense for the kind of character he was, and he actually felt like a threat compared to how he felt in Code Veronica. Or in Code Veronica, it got very anime, so too over the top. But in the context of Resident Evil 5, it actually worked better.
Okay.
Especially because of how trying to say the right words. Wesker's plan fits in more with the tone of 5.
Okay. You've mentioned DLC a couple of times.
Yeah.
Is DLC, when we're talking about the remake, you kind of talked about it fixing it or filling holes in it.
Yeah, because Resident Evil 4, the original, there was the Separate Ways content that was included with that game starting from Resident Evil 4's PS2 release. So not the original GameCube version. And it's the game from Ada Wong's perspective, so it fills in some story gaps. And Resident Evil 4 Remake was designed with the Separate Ways content in mind. So stuff that was cut from this or cut from the original when making this, made it back into Separate Ways.
Okay.
So Separate Ways completes the story from Ada's perspective without feeling like just mostly recycled assets.
Okay, so you don't feel like it's, oops, here's something to make it better. I mean,
Right.
Okay.
In the case of this, it's like prequel content. Well, Lost in Nightmares is prequel content and depicts an event that is hinted at in the story, which is Jill's disappearance. The desperate escape fills in a story gap where I believe Sheva is escaping with someone else. Anyway, I thought Resident Evil 5, I would want to see what a remake would do with it, but at least as far as the story goes, I actually liked that aspect.
Okay.
The gameplay could have been better, but it did at least improve on the original Resident Evil 4 in some ways. And this is actually the last time that it's, even though it's even more actiony than the original Resident Evil 4 was, it still had some focus on horror. So this is kind of the last time there's even this. They even try to balance action and horror.
All right. Okay. So you would recommend the game?
Yes, but I would recommend the more recent releases because it has all of the content from Gold Edition on the disc instead of as a
separate.
Yeah. Speaking of, I also have the Gold Edition still for the PS3.
Okay.
Now, I played it in full for the first time with the HD version, or the re-release, I should say. This is already HD. Sorry.
Fine.
But I kept this because it has Move support. The PlayStation Move was a motion control peripheral.
Right.
You could view that as like Sony's attempt to capitalize on the Wii, which it probably was. But it does actually add to the gameplay, I think. So this is also a good way to go. Now, from what I recall, the Gold Edition has the DLC on the disc if it's the PS3 version. The 360 version had that content as a separate download. So the PS3 Gold Edition is a more complete package for people who care about preservation.
Okay. And of course, you care about preservation.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Feel like my voice is not all there. Now, I did play a couple of, they're technically not main games, but I only played them because the wiki called them main games. One of them was the first Resident Evil Revelations, which follows Jill and Chris, and it involves a ship called the Queen Zenobia. And this was originally a DS game, or DS or 3DS game, and you could actually tell by the way it's made that it was originally made with that in mind.
Okay.
But this is actually the first console Resident Evil game that the first Resident Evil game actually that lets you move and shoot at the same time. So that was a plus. I liked some of the ideas with the first Revelations, but I thought it didn't all gel quite well, especially with side characters who are just not well written.
Right.
Like one of them, I forgot her name, but she's partnered with Chris during 3 campaigns in here that hops between, and in Chris's campaign, he's partnered with someone who is a little too horny
Okay.
for him. And the Jill campaign is the most interesting, but the 3rd campaign is just like,
Okay.
with those characters. This is a good game from a gameplay standpoint for the most part, but it's just okay overall, because there's still some annoyances, like there's a scanning function, so you can scan the environment to find certain items, or gain herbs from scanning certain enemies enough times, but you have to like stop whatever you're doing to look around.
Okay.
So it's a little awkward.
Makes you vulnerable, I assume.
Yeah. So this was alright.
Okay. Not highly recommended.
No, it does take place between 5 and 6, so that makes you think it's relevant, but it's really only relevant at like literally the last second when it just teases Jill being in Resident Evil 6, so, or Jill / Chris being in Resident Evil 6, so that doesn't really add anything.
Okay.
So, then we have Resident Evil 6. I played the PS4 version because it has everything on the disc.
The greatest hits or something.
And this is bad. It has like for the time modernized controls and gameplay elements, but there's like 4 games worth of content on here that sounds like a good deal, but it's not, because they all feel different. So they're all different gameplay styles to try to appeal to every corner of the Resident Evil fandom who prefers certain types of Resident Evil gameplay. And it's like there's too much. The writing is just okay, but the main villain is one of the worst in the series, at least in my opinion, because his motivation is just terrible. And it takes the viral threat worldwide, which is a little too big.
Okay.
Honestly, I think Resident Evil is better when it's confined in a single environment.
Okay. Smaller is better.
Yeah, because then it feels more focused.
Right.
And I think I'm actually trying to remember which campaigns I actually liked. I think I generally liked Leon's campaign. In general, there's kind of too much going on. It makes sense when you play all 4 of them, and that's actually the problem. It tries to appeal to everyone by having 4 separate campaigns, but you have to play all 4 campaigns anyway to fully understand the story, because there's crossovers between the campaigns at different times.
Oh, I see.
And this also was, remember when I said 5 was the last time there was a semblance of balance, at least at the time? This feels a lot more like a playable, bombastic action movie. Because one of the big problems is it's not just the fact that it has quick time events, which the original Resident Evil 4 popularized, and thankfully the remake downplayed significantly. But this is like filled to the brim with QTEs, and it gets it can get like hard on your hand.
Okay.
Just because like you do this, you do QTEs here, and then you do QTEs here. There's a QTE for like almost everything, like especially because it tries to be a lot more cinematic, which is part of the reason it feels too much like an action movie, with de-emphasize horror. Like, there's a part in Leon's campaign where you have to get in a car to escape. It's kind of early. And you have to do QTEs to do every single part of, like, starting the car and driving.
That's a lot. Does the story get resolved each game? Or does it depend on the game?
Each game's story resolves within itself, but they liked to build on the last entry, and usually the threat was the Umbrella Corporation. I think this is kind of the last time we see Umbrella as the... Actually, Umbrella stopped. It's kind of getting...
So,
I know for sure Umbrella was a threat in... was at least up to Resident Evil 3. Umbrella was the main threat. Resident Evil 4, it was a different group of people altogether, which was actually kind of refreshing. Resident Evil 5 brought back Wesker. That actually felt like a finale, but of course it can't be the finale because it's their big IP. They gotta make more. And then this went... this sold well, but it went too far in the opposite direction. I would only really recommend this to people who are were like me and trying to play all the games.
Okay.
It is easily one of the worst mainline entries just because it's too bloated.
okay. Tries too hard to do too much.
Yeah.
That's a lesson out there.
As you say, it stretches itself too thin.
Right.
Oh, and then there's like a bajillion multiplayer modes.
Wow.
So that you could tell it was made with online in mind. No. After Resident Evil 6, there's also Resident Evil Revelations 2.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I got it wrong.
Uh-oh.
This takes place between 4 and 5.
Okay.
This takes place between 5 and 6.
Okay.
And both times...
so no letters. Or
both times, it just amounts to, like, it's a tease. And that's it. So Revelations 2 was, to me, was actually way better than Revelations 1. It has 2 campaigns, but they are woven together a lot better because they take place at 2 different points in time. So you see Claire's story, and Barry's story. So Claire is at one point in time in the Barry story. The main twist in the first episode is that he's like, was it months later? Yeah, months later. So you get to see the same things at 2 different points in time, and that made it more compelling,
Okay.
I guess. This was done in the episodic format originally, because the idea was it's like an episodic TV show, and this release has all 4 episodes on the disc, so you don't have to worry about downloading each one separately. It also has 2 side stories. One of them was pretty good, and the other was pretty meh.
Okay.
Maybe this had also had more of an emphasis on horror than I think Revelations 1 did.
Yeah.
I guess this is also kind of a breath of fresh air to me after 6, because this felt more like a traditional, like what you'd expect from Resident Evil. So I really liked Revelations 2.
Okay. Now you mentioned side stories.
Yeah.
Is this kind of a side story in itself?
Yes, it is a side side game.
With the side story.
Yeah.
Okay.
It still had its own side content
Okay.
that filled in a couple story gaps.
Okay. Again, he's under the weather.
Yeah. So then we get to Resident Evil 7,
Mm-hmm.
which is my favorite game in the series.
All right.
It's also the the first one I actually played all the way through. So to me, this was my formal introduction to the series.
Okay.
And this is also a really good jumping on point because its story is almost 100% disconnected from everything else, but still has uses the elements of classic Resident Evil, but done in a brand new way that feels refreshing, even in the context of the rest of the games.
Okay.
And I know from experience, because I started with this one, that it's a really good, mostly pretty standalone experience on its own.
So you played 7 and then went back and played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I played 7 and then Village and then went back.
Okay.
For a specific reason I can get into when I get to
All right.
Village.
All right.
But this one follows Ethan Winters, who is looking for his wife Mia in Dulvey, Louisiana, because he received a message from her to go there because she had been missing.
Okay.
But then he has to fend off the Baker family, who are trying to make him one of the family.
Oh.
So this, to me, is my favorite because it does the horror element really well. It's in a very small location, which is the Baker plantation.
Okay.
The first part of the game especially takes place in the I believe the main house, guest house, then main house, and that's a confined space, so it has the opportunity to really ramp up the tension. And every single time, having to run away from Jack Baker is terrifying.
Okay.
He's a pursuer in the vein of like Mr. X or the Nemesis, but he isn't as like robotic as they are. If hopefully that makes sense. He's more human because he is kind of human still,
Okay.
and that his taunts are part of the reason he's terrifying. But there's also like if he catches you, he will not stop.
Okay.
And Ethan also has to fend off the molded that are in the plantation, which are the product of it's something they're the product of a mold infection. For some reason the words aren't
That's
good. But I thought the story was really good and had really good twists. I also especially liked the idea that even though the Bakers are the enemies for most of the game, most of them are actually like victims themselves of the real main antagonist, who is on the cover.
okay.
And the gold edition has everything on the disc, and pretty much all of the DLC is also really good.
Right.
I especially like for the DLC. I especially like Bedroom, Nightmare, or actually Bedroom Daughters in 21. Nightmare is I'm not too good at that.
Okay.
But like Bedroom is like really good escape puzzle, and 21 is a very sadistic version of 21. It If someone's familiar with Buckshot Roulette, it has a similar tone and gameplay style, but with cards. Daughters is a prequel story that helps fill in story, as you get to see what happened to the baker. You get to witness the baker's transformation firsthand from Zoe's perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, in general, the story is incredible. The gameplay is also a really good mixture of modernization, but also old school Resident Evil, including an item box, limited inventory, though you can expand it. I didn't like the idea that you have to carry everything that you want to with you, because that means key items and crafting items take up the exact same space as like weapons, ammo, and healing items. But I have like very few complaints overall about Biohazard. To me, it's one of the best survival horror games ever made.
Okay. Sounds like you like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know you can't skip the cutscenes for some reason, but I enjoy. If I was less terrified of the game on subsequent playthroughs, but I still enjoyed seeing everything that happens. And actually, this last time I was still caught off guard by at least a couple of jump scares. Oh yeah, there's also story expansions, Not a Hero and End of Zoe. Those are also worth playing because Not a Hero finishes the story from Chris Redfield's perspective. He comes back. End of Zoe formally finishes the story by explaining what happened to Zoe from the perspective of another baker named Joe Baker, who was not infected. And you actually get to just like punch everything, which is really cathartic after having to like conserve your resources to get through, and being overpowered by other enemies.
Okay.
There's a better way to say that.
All right.
Like instead of like cowering and conserving resources, you can just
Okay, cool. All right, so we're finally down to
Resident Evil Village. I didn't get the gold edition of this one because that content is on a code, so I just bought the winner's expansion.
Okay.
No, I know not everyone likes Village, but personally I loved it, and I loved it even more with the context of the rest of the series.
Okay.
There's a, I guess I'll say now, there's a note near the end of the game that recontextualizes all of Resident Evil, and that's what made me go back to play the other games. But
secret revealed.
yeah, anyway, this continues Ethan's story, but he is now trying to find his daughter Rose, who has been taken from him in I believe a Romanian village, or just European village. It's it's kind of a mixture of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 4. Those two philosophies, so that means it's less scary. They actually did that on purpose because I guess some people were too scared by the opening portion of Biohazard.
Alright.
But I thought it still nailed the action element because it wasn't like over the top actiony.
Uh-huh.
Was the right to me. It was the right mixture of horror and action, and I really love the setting. I love how it develops Ethan as a character instead of being mostly a vessel for the player. Because by the end of the game, you actually feel bad for what happens to him.
Okay.
And it has good story, generally good story twists, really memorable characters and villains. The Duke is also the equivalent to the Merchant from Resident Evil 4, but I also liked how he's very helpful, like actively helpful to Ethan. And I thought there was I just really like pretty much everything about Village.
Okay, do you like it more than 7 or equal?
Kind of on par
Okay.
to me. This was just a really good evolution of what Resident Evil 7 did, while still retaining the horror element, which it actually does really well in the house. There's 4 locations you have to go to, and one of them is House Benevento, and that one really dials up the horror.
Okay. Which is a good thing to discuss at Halloween.
Yes.
Alright.
Now, since I said I had to buy the DLC, I might as well talk about the Winter's expansion.
Okay.
So, part of that is being able to play Village in third person. Personally, I preferred playing it in first person because it was clearly made with that in mind. But the third person option is good for people who have motion sickness.
Okay. Oh, okay.
From playing in first person.
Right.
There's also... I'm just going to... look this up real quick.
Okay.
There's also more Mercenaries content, although personally I think the Mercenaries mode in Village is not that great, because you have to, like, if you want to unlock certain weapons, which you can just get right away with another bit of DLC that I got for my second playthrough, you have to really grind Mercenaries to get really good ranks. And I found that particular iteration just not as fun as like Resident Evil 4 Remake's iteration, which to me was the best version.
Okay.
I mean, 4 Remake came out after Village, so I had time to improve it. And then there was the Shadows of Rose DLC. I didn't dislike Shadows of Rose like other people seems to, well, not to the same extent. However, where I think it really fell short was the fact that it's like 99% recycled assets. So that just felt lazy.
Yeah.
And then the ending pretty much just goes up to the post credits of the base game, so it doesn't even advance the story beyond what we see at the end of Village.
Okay. All right. So, in summation,
for those watching, I'll just hold up the game.
all right.
Good, like arguably perfecting on perfection.
It's a remake of 4.
Yeah, 4 remake. Near
What's your-
flawless to me.
Okay.
5, good. Gold edition, PS3, also good for the move compatibility.
Alright.
Revelations 1, okay. Resident Evil 6, bad. Rev 2, good.
Alright.
7, best one to me.
Okay.
Be a little biased because I started with that one. And Village, on par, pretty much on par with 7.
Okay. And that catches us up to all the Resident Evil games.
Yeah.
So there was a video from last year. In this video,
Yeah.
you get them all.
No, I know not everyone would agree with my opinions on the games because I had a different journey, and I know different people have different expectations for Resident Evil, and that's okay.
Is it
just-
really?
It's just this is how I felt actually from playing all pretty much back to back.
Okay.
So, if you're watching this on YouTube and you liked this, leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and leave a comment below if you have your own opinions on the Resident Evil games. Whether you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear it.
All right. And if you're looking for a silent fidget toy, use our affiliate code Marty and Eli to save 10% off your purchase at
OnoRoller.com.
There you go. So, until next time, I'm David Hankins,
I'm Paul Hankins.
and you've been on the air with Power Squared.